All right, so I'm going to make a video on a prong collar and proper use because there's a great need for that right now. So when you look at the prong collar, for sure, yeah, it looks bad, but guess what? It's not. So if I put this on my arm, basically what the prongs do is they create a smaller surface area on the neck. So when you pull into it, it doesn't hurt, but it's uncomfortable. I'm not going to pull into it very long. I'm going to release. And that release is the most important moment when you're training a dog. So for example, if I take a flat collar and I put this flat collar on my arm and I pull into it, man, that's comfortable. I could pull you across the room on that if I'm stronger than you, and a dog is definitely stronger than you. So they're just going to pull and potentially hurt their neck and potentially collapse their trachea. And yeah, you can try a slip lead, and a slip lead will just choke them, and they'll pull anyway and choke themselves because they don't care. And then if you're not using it correctly, it could hurt the dog even worse. So in the studies that have been done on prong collars, and there's a study done by a vet who was an orthopedic specialist, and she did a study with, I think, 250 dogs, and they followed the dogs over a 10-year period, and at the end of the study, no injuries were found to dogs who'd worn prong collars, but multiple injuries were from front clip harnesses, halties, flat collars, and slip leads. So there you go. So, prong collar, pressure release. We put it on the dog. There's two ways to use it. There's two different rings. There is a D ring, shaped like a D, and there's an O ring, shaped like an O. You never just hook it on the O ring. You can either hook it on the D ring, which has a tightening action. It's like a martingale, it only tightens so far. And then you can hook it on both rings where there's no tightening, okay? So that's where we usually use it, and that's always where we start dogs on it. So that's where it applies direct pressure. So if they pull into it, it's pressure, they pull up, they stop pulling, the pressure immediately shuts off, okay? And it's also got directional pressure. So that means that the pressure is mostly on the front of the neck, so that when they stop pulling, it immediately shuts off. It's not all the way around, because I find all the way around can kind of like, they don't know which way to go. So I always put it on the double ring, so that there can help them to learn directional pressure. So basically, what you do, and this is how it's going to work, is you're going to put the prong collar on and you're going to put it snug, because it's no good if it's loose and it's no good if it's at the bottom of the neck. The bottom of the neck is a no-no. You put it up high, at least halfway up or to the top, okay? And your prong collar should always be a Springer brand, a Herm Springer brand, because they have rounded tips. You go to the pet store and you buy a cheap brand that the tips are just cut off. They can be sharp and you don't want that to hurt your dog. So you have to make sure that you're using the brand name prong collar, the Herm Springer only, and that you are applying this applying the tool correctly. Any tool, anything can be abusive. My hands, my feet, a choke chain, a flat collar, hell, a leash. So you need to make sure that you don't fall under this cloud of misinformation of that the tool is abusive just because of how it looks. And the thing that I like about a prong collar is it has fast results. You immediately get the dog to stop pulling. But not only that, is there's no conflict between the handler and the dog. You don't have any popping, any jerking or yanking on your dog. It's very gentle. It's almost like fine-tuning your dog. And actually it ends up increasing the bond between a lot of people and their dog, because it's frustrating having the dog pulling your arm off. It's frustrating not being able to walk a hyper dog, especially like a big lab or something. They're already pulling you across the road. I've had clients pulled into the road by their giant breeds. They're scared to walk them now. The dog's not getting walked. And it's a vicious cycle, because the more the dog doesn't get walked, the more energy it has to pull. So it's just very sad that I see dogs that aren't getting exercise because people don't want to use a prong collar, or they don't think they can use a prong collar because there's stigma online, and all the articles on Google say that you should stay away from prong collar. Like, what the heck? Like, I'd like to see who's writing those articles and if they're professional dog trainers, and if they've ever actually learned how to use a prong collar correctly and seen the amazing results and the amazing relationships that it can produce between the handler and the dog. So I'm going to show you how to correctly fit this. This is Ruby. Ruby's only 7 or 8 months old Doberman, completely out of control when she came. She's been here 4 weeks now. Okay. So Ruby is going to demo the prong collar here. So, okay, you lift it up. Good girl. it's nice and high on her neck, and it's snug enough that, come here, Ruby. Sit. Good girl. On a Doberman, it's going to be the hardest because this hair is so short that it's going to slide. So we don't want to have it super loose, but it can't really ever be tight enough that it's not going to slide, okay? And that goes for every short-haired dog. It's going to slide. You just have to keep putting it back up. But I can fit a couple fingers between her neck and the prongs. If I take one more prong out, it's going to be too tight. So I just want it to be snug. If you have a longer hair dog or a dog with a curly coat, it can be pretty snug because the curly coat is going to hold it in place, or the longer coat. If you have a dog like an Aussie, you sometimes will have to deal with a little bit of technique taking it off because it could catch in the hair if you let it roll. It'll roll the hair up and then it'll get tangled. So you have to pull it out away from the neck and then unclip it. Good girl. So basically when you first put this prong collar on a dog, you're going to see the best thing, like say that this dog had never had a prong collar on before. What I would do is I'd start out walking the dog, and when they came up into the prong collar, I just walk them on a nice loose leash. Good girl. I'm going to throw a treat. You come up against it, I'm going to hold, and then let the dog come back towards me and figure out how to turn that pressure off. Good girl. You're so good. You can get it. Good girl. So anytime that the dog comes up against the pressure, up against the collar, so say for example, she pulls into that pressure. I'm never going to go with the dog and let them pull into the pressure. I'm going to block from them moving forward on that collar, and if anything, excuse me, I'll try to help the dog come back toward me if it's not looking like it's going to. Most dogs, they just come against it, and then they turn back toward me and they get the immediate release, and I just say good dog and good girl. But if they're like really bracy dog and they just sit there on the pressure, you just increase the pressure a little bit and until you see that dog make a step back, and then you release, you know, and you just teach the dog that the feet moving off the pressure gets the release. And most dogs, especially if they're young and they haven't pulled a tremendous amount into training tools, they just immediately don't pull. Good girl. I'm going to watch her a little bit again. She might try to go there. Good girl. Good. And this is typically what it looks like within a few minutes. And I will include a video right after this clip of the first introduction to a dog with a prong collar, golden retriever. It's an older video that I made that I never put up, but it is worth watching because it shows the immediate change in the same 5 minutes of the dog and his pulling, which was extremely dangerous. So, this is Roby, and yeah, see how the prong collar slid down to the bottom? I'm just gonna grab the collar, and then I'm gonna grab the skin with the other hand and pull the skin down, all the way around. Good. Good girl. Now, the one mistake that I see that I have to address is when people get a prong collar on, they're so used to like holding their dog with all their might that they end up like holding tension on the leash, and then the dog is like, hey dude, what the heck, like why are you pulling on me like that? So you have to remember that this is the goal. The loose leash is the goal. So if the dog doesn't pull into the leash, your leash should be loose. It can still be slack, without being tight, without being like, come here, Ruby. Sometimes I say slacken your leash and people do this. You don't have to throw your entire leash away to slacken it. Okay, good girl, you're being so good. Sit. Heel. Sit. A slack leash can just be relaxing your elbow. So don't be tense. Relax. Walk your dog. First time with a prong collar on, don't have your leash super tight or super short. Have the dog have a little slack so it can leave and feel it and come back. Leave, feel it, come back. And then after maybe 5 reps of that, you start walking the dog and start to expect that the dog starts to understand what to do. And yeah, it goes pretty quick. And then you can enjoy your walks, and your dog is better off for it. And it's not an abusive tool. It's a beautiful tool when used correctly, and when you're using it in the way that the dog learns how to turn off the pressure and how to walk. There's no conflict, there's no corrections, there's no jerking, and the dog is happier. So before I play the clip of the golden retriever, I wanted to show you the difference of Ruby outside instead of just inside where there's absolutely no distractions. She actually keeps bumping into my leg in this clip, so I kind of guide her away from me with the leash and then release. So remember always that the most important thing you can do for your dog is release the pressure. That's the reward for them. That's kind of what the what the idea is to show them where they should walk and not just leave them alone there, you know? So she's doing really, really good here on the way back. Now, I tried it on the grass because she wasn't pulling at all in the driveway, and I wanted to see if just walking on the grass would give a little bit more distraction, and it does work, and it allows me to demonstrate here. There, I just kind of pulled her back toward me and then released. She gets a little distracted. I pulled her back, and you see I'm not pulling very hard. It's more just like a reminder of like, stay with me. Now here we're going to watch the golden retriever. The video is pretty self-explanatory. This dog pulled incredibly hard. I couldn't believe how out of control the dog was. It's not an unusual case either. We see dogs like this every day. And it's very typical that the owner doesn't walk the dog because of this behavior. People sometimes ask if we ever use head collars. Yeah, on some dogs we might use a head collar, but often we find that the dogs do not prefer the head collars to the prong collars. If we have a more sensitive dog to the prong collar, we might try a head collar, but they can sometimes cause some issues with the neck and the eyes and stuff. Not every dog, will have those problems with it, but I just find that the prong collar works a lot better than the head collar in some situations, but we have used head collars on several dogs. He's kind of a funny guy. So here you can see I'm not really caring where he walks because I'm just letting him figure out the prong collar, and I have kind of a slack leash so he can go up ahead, and then I'm letting him kind of come up against the pressure and then helping him to come back toward me and having that release. That's beautiful. He really wanted to go to that shelf, so that was kind of a big distraction. He ended up being a really nice, fast learner. In all aspects, but generally with the prong collar, it's this fast for every dog. And this is a few minutes later outside.